regret this. My family doesn't lose. By now, the online video had gained traction in national media. A local news anchor picked up the story and ran a segment titled Homeowner Battles HOA for Right to Her Own House. The comments were relentless. People were furious. Petitions started popping up demanding the HOA be investigated. Others suggested raising money to help me take legal action. I didn't want donations. I wanted peace. But I also knew it wouldn't come easy. The day before the scheduled wedding rehearsal, my lawyer called with an update. The county clerk had received a suspicious filing attempting to place a public access easement across my backyard. It had been submitted by someone named K. Winters and had been quietly denied due to missing documentation. But the attempt itself proved what we had suspected all along. Karen wasn't just trying to borrow the land. She was trying to reclassify it, take it from me piece by piece until it belonged to her in practice, if not on paper. I thanked my lawyer and told her I was ready. We would go to court if we had to. Then something unexpected happened. A news crew arrived at the edge of my driveway. They asked if I would be willing to speak on camera. At first I refused, but then I realized something. Karen had used every trick she had to control the narrative. Invitations, social pressure, false listings. Maybe it was time I used my voice too. So I stepped in front of the camera and told the story as plainly as I could. About the history of the farmhouse. About the way my family had built it up from nothing. About the stress and fear of having your life invaded by someone who thinks your no is just a starting point for negotiation. When I finished, the reporter thanked me. I went back inside, unsure if anything would come of it. That night I heard a knock. A soft one. I opened the door to find an elderly woman standing there with a box of cookies. She introduced herself as Lillian, a neighbor from 3 roads over. She said she had watched the story unfold online and wanted me to know not everyone around here supported what Karen was doing. She said the land deserved to be respected. That I deserved to be left in peace. I nearly cried. I thanked her and accepted the cookies, even though I could hardly eat. The morning of the supposed rehearsal came bright and warm. No tents, no trucks, just stillness. I half expected a surprise ambush, but nothing happened. Then, around noon, 2 squad cars rolled in and parked near the gate. I stepped out, heart racing. The sheriff approached me and said, "Thought you'd want to know. We had to shut down a gathering at the Willow Creek Clubhouse. Karen tried to move the rehearsal there last minute, but someone from the HOA board tipped us off. Turns out she never had permission for any of it. Not the event, not the vendors, not even the booking. And now she's being investigated for falsifying zoning records." I blinked. "What happens now?" he smiled. "That's up to the court. But she won't be bothering you again for a while." I thanked him and watched the cars drive off. For the first time in weeks, the land felt quiet again. No strangers. No flyers. No entitled declarations. Just wind through the trees and the distant sound of birds returning to the feeders. I stood there for a long time, not moving, just listening. This was more than property. It was peace. It was memory. And no one had the right to take it away. 2 weeks passed before the letter arrived. It was crisp and official-looking, with the seal of the county courthouse embossed in the corner and my name printed neatly across the front. I already knew what it was before opening it. Karen had filed a lawsuit. The envelope contained pages of legal jargon accusing me of defamation, obstruction, and intentional interference with her event planning business. My lawyer called it what it was, a retaliatory stunt with no legal footing. But it still meant we had to prepare for court. Karen was not done. If anything, she was doubling down, trying to wear me down with procedure and paperwork. We spent the next few days gathering everything. Every photo, every flyer, every trespassing report. The emails from vendors. The forged documents. The easement attempt. Even the rental orders and screenshots from the fake listings. My folder labeled Karen Chronicles had grown thick and undeniable. My lawyer told me she had handled her fair share of property disputes, but never one wrapped in wedding invitations and criminal fraud. She said Karen was not just crossing the line, she was sprinting past it blindfolded. I told her Karen never met a line she didn't think she could paint over with glitter. The day of the hearing arrived with gray skies and a restless wind. I dressed plainly, something respectful but strong. No ruffles. No frills. Just me. My lawyer and I met in front of the courthouse where a few small news outlets had already gathered. Someone snapped a photo of me walking in. I tried not to think about it. Inside, the courtroom smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Karen was already seated with her lawyer, a man who looked both expensive and exhausted. She wore a beige suit and the same tight smile she always had, but her eyes darted too fast. Nervous. Maybe for the first time. The judge was a woman in her 60s with a calm face and no tolerance for nonsense. She began by asking both sides to present opening statements. Karen's lawyer spoke first, trying to paint her as a visionary unfairly slandered and obstructed by a hostile neighbor. He used words like misunderstood and aspirational. He claimed her intent was never malicious, that she had believed the land was accessible due to outdated zoning confusion and community precedent. My lawyer stood next and countered with receipts, with facts, with timelines. She calmly explained how Karen had faked listings, submitted forged documents, coordinated unauthorized events, and harassed me over weeks, escalating until police intervention was necessary. The judge listened without expression. Then came the witness testimonies. First up was the rental company representative. He confirmed that Karen had booked the equipment using my name and address without proof of ownership. He explained how the setup team was told it was all cleared with the homeowner, only to find out the opposite on arrival. Then came the local vendor who had refused to deliver catering after learning about the fraud. He brought printed emails where Karen referred to herself as the property manager. It wasn't just bold. It was reckless. When it was my turn, I stepped up and told the truth. How I had lived on that land for years. How I had said no repeatedly, only to be ignored, mocked, and trespassed on. How it stopped being about a wedding and became something darker, something that felt like erasure. I told the judge that Karen had tried to make me feel like a squatter in my own home, that she dressed her manipulation in politeness, but beneath it was pressure and entitlement. I told her I had never met someone so committed to pretending ownership was optional if your vision board was strong enough. Karen did not testify. Her lawyer must have known better. But she sat there, lips tight, hands gripping the sides of her chair, barely blinking as the evidence piled higher. Her eyes flicked toward me once, and I met her gaze without flinching. There was no smugness in her stare anymore. Only disbelief. As if she still could not understand how all of this had unraveled. That her curated world had crumbled under the weight of one word she never expected to be final. No. The judge recessed for lunch and said she would return with a ruling in the afternoon. I stepped outside to breathe. People nodded at me in quiet support. One man handed me a thermos of tea and said, "That woman tried something like this with my uncle. Didn't go this far, but close." I nodded. We both knew this wasn't just about me. It was about the idea that people like Karen exist everywhere, trying to bend the world to their comfort at the cost of everyone else. When court resumed, the judge wasted no time. She ruled in my favor on every count. The defamation claim was dismissed. The property interference accusation rejected. And on top of it, she found Karen in violation of multiple civil codes, including impersonation and filing fraudulent documentation. A fine was issued. A formal warning entered into the public record. And I was awarded damages for legal fees and stress-related losses. The judge concluded by saying something I would never forget. The right to dream does not give anyone the right to displace. Property is not a prop. People are not scenery. Karen did not speak as the ruling was read. She stood slowly, gathered her purse, and walked out with her head down. Her daughter wasn't there. Neither were any of the HOA members who had once nodded along with her plans. She left alone. I stayed behind to sign paperwork, but when I finally stepped back outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds had begun to roll in. It felt fitting. The storm had broken. Not the weather. The long storm of being silenced, doubted, and nearly erased. Back home, I sat on the porch and watched the field sway gently in the wind. The flowers I had planted months ago were blooming, stubborn, and bright. My rooster crowed somewhere in the distance, victorious. I had fought for this place not just because it was mine, but because it deserved to be safe from theft dressed in silk. There would be no wedding here. No tent. No arches. Just peace. Just the slow, beautiful sound of a life lived by choice, not by demand. The morning sunlight hit the porch steps just right, painting long golden streaks across the planks as I sipped my coffee. The air was warm but not heavy, the kind of gentle stillness that only comes after a long fight is over. The land around me felt different now. Not in a physical sense, but in spirit. The quiet was no longer tense or anticipatory. It was full and earned. For the first time in months, I didn't flinch at the sound of a car approaching. I didn't check the gate 3 times before bed. I didn't wait for the next surprise. Because there wouldn't be one. The storm was over, and this farmhouse was still mine. I had barely finished my first cup when I heard soft footsteps approaching. A man stood at the gate, holding a small envelope and a bouquet of wildflowers. He looked a little unsure of himself, like he wasn't sure if he should even be there. He introduced himself as Jake, a local veteran who had served with my cousin years ago. He said he had seen the news coverage and just wanted to say thank you for standing your ground. Then he hesitated, glanced down at the flowers, and explained that he and his fiancée had been planning a tiny wedding but had lost their venue last minute. Nothing fancy, just a few people and a small ceremony. No tents, no vendors, no flash. He said they were even willing to pay, but mostly they just needed a quiet space with meaning. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. After everything, the word wedding still made my spine tighten. But this wasn't Karen. There was no arrogance in his tone, no assumption of access. Just hope, offered humbly. I looked past him at the fields, now green and alive, and thought of all the times this land had seen joy. My grandparents dancing in the garden. My mother baking pies in the kitchen with the windows open. My dad fixing fences in the summer heat with a radio playing old country music nearby. This place had always held love. Maybe it was time it saw some new kind. I nodded and told him he and his fiancée could come by that weekend. No charge. No strings. Just bring what you need and leave it better than you found it. He smiled so wide I thought he might cry. He thanked me over and over before leaving the envelope, which turned out to contain a handwritten note from his fiancée. She said they had grown up just a few miles from the farm, always admiring it from a distance, and that being married there would mean more than any ballroom or resort. The letter was sweet and honest and reminded me that not everyone saw land as a trophy. Some people saw it as home even when it wasn't theirs. The wedding day arrived quietly. No music. No trucks. Just a handful of friends and family in folding chairs beneath the big oak tree near the barn. The bride wore a simple dress with lace sleeves and carried wildflowers like the ones I'd been given. Jake stood tall in a dark blue suit, his hands shaking slightly as he waited for her. I watched from the porch, far enough away to give them space but close enough to witness it. The vows were soft, spoken in low voices filled with truth. There were no photographers, no live streams, just love as it was meant to be, pure and unforced. After the ceremony, they invited me to join them for lemonade and sandwiches laid out on a checkered cloth under the tree. I hesitated, then accepted. We laughed. We talked about old times and future plans. Someone asked me about the farmhouse, and I told them stories of the past. The raccoon in the attic. The thunderstorm that knocked out power for 3 days. The time my cousin got stuck in the mud behind the barn and had to be pulled out with a tractor. Everyone laughed. No one asked about Karen. Later that evening, after every